it's a pleasure to be able to present some of the work that we're doing here at Syngenta to the wider community. So yes, as you said, I plan on talking for about 30 minutes today, so that should give everybody enough time to go home and watch the football if you've got long journeys ahead. So what I'm going to be talking about today is first of all a bit of a professional background, so where I sit within the company, then move on to the ways of working with Dynochem, so sort of our strategy in using Dynochem, and then finally the application of that in a case study. And that case study is going to be a book called Hartwig Amination, but the sort of learnings that we have for this are general across many catalytic reactions. So the kind of approach that we prefer is really integrating Dynochem into every step of your thinking process. So you define your project, you formulate your hypothesis, and at this point you can start to build a model in Dynochem. So you can do a series of what-if or thought experiments. Now obviously you're not going to be using the correct rate constant, so you may not even have the correct model, but it can give you an idea of what could happen and what you could expect. You can then do your experiment, do a simulation, and you can find that you either get a good fit or a bad fit. Now by good and bad fit, I mean that your simulated data can overlay with your kinetic data, and this assumes good data. If you don't have a good mole balance or you've got poor reproducibility, the last thing you want to do is discount a model based on bad data. So if you get a bad fit, you then have to reconsider your hypothesis and continually simulate with different models until you get a good fit. Once you get a good fit, your job isn't over. You then need to test your hypothesis by doing a series of experiments until you decide that you've done enough and you've got to your current or accepted model. So the advantages with this approach is we feel that it could reduce the time taken to complete your project. So you could do, say, an experiment in the morning, your simulations in the afternoon, and what this does is you can gain value from Dynochem after only one experiment, and that's what I'm going to try and stress today. You don't need to get a predictive model to start to get value from Dynochem. And what this approach does is it guides your experiments logically. So every experiment that you do is designed to test the robustness of your model as stringently as possible. The disadvantages are, however, that your experimentalist and the person who's using Dynochem have to be closely related. So or ideally they're the same person, otherwise you'll waste time filling in the person in, they do the model, and then you go back and forwards. Ideally it's the same person who's doing the experiments that's doing the simulation. And that will become more and more significant as you slow down this feed. So you're going to get more of this overreacted product the slower your feed, because the concentration of your amine throughout the reaction is going to be very low. That's going to, your product will build up and form your overreacted product. So don't do this unless the overreacted product is your desired product. So the alternative, of course, is feeding the aryl bromide, and this would probably be the preferred method. However, we have to be cautious now because we've identified catalyst deactivation. So remember I said that the concentration of our aryl bromide affects the amount of deactivation that you get. So if you do a feed of your aryl bromide, you're going to get much poorer yields, and that's because you're getting more deactivation. The concentration of this is lower than if you were to do everything in batch, and your reaction is going to stall at an earlier point. And once again, the slower your, so that's just all the information I was saying, the slower your feed, the more significant this is going to become, and the lower your overall yield will be. There will be no expense of your selectivity, that will remain the same, but you're going to potentially get poorer yields. So that's just a red flag and something that we would certainly consider if going to a feed. So that brings me to the end of the talk. Hopefully what I've showed you is that from just a few experiments and using Dynochem, you can extract some very useful pieces of information at the early stages of project. So we can extract the selectivity from the model. We've identified catalyst deactivation and the likely place in the catalytic cycle that it can occur. we've we've outlined probable issues associated with feed control, and also the potential for significant reduction of the amine concentration.